Welcome to Worth the Work. I am here with Mel Goodman and super excited that she's our guest to join today. We are discussing not burnout specifically, but more so the drift that leads us to burnout and what that means in today's workplace. Mel, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to this place today.
Yeah, absolutely. Courtney, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. I spent about 15 years corporate in the tech world and was leading teams, building teams from scratch, and always had that definition of success around climbing the ladder. And then when I became a mom, as most moms feel, as most parents feel, life shifts drastically. And your perspective shifts, your values shift, and you start to feel this misalignment. That's how I felt. And for me, it actually stemmed from burning out multiple times in that part of my career. And after it was around maybe the third time that I burnt out, I realized, okay, something is off here. I need to do something about this. I didn't have a word for it at the time. I didn't quite understand that I was in deep burnout. And so, really, I always had that definition of success around being endlessly available and never dropping the ball. And when I had specifically my second baby, everything that I had built my identity on just stopped working. I ended up with postpartum anxiety, imposter syndrome. There was an RTO mandate at the time. And there was then this big that was happening. And in addition to that, a lot of childcare obstacles that we were facing at home. So all of these things converging at once really made me question a lot, and it led to deep overwhelm, anxiety, and that's what I felt at the time, but I think it was actually burnout. I know it was burnout, right? And what happened was when they went through this big reorg, my team was going to be a big part of that reorg. And I had a feeling that about two-thirds of my team was going to be cut. I was a second line leader at the time. They wouldn't have needed me after the layoffs were going to happen. And so I had this strong feeling that I would be on the layoff list. And what happened was I started to hope that my name was going to be on the list.
Which to like, oh, this would be terrifying. And also, could it be real though?
Exactly.
And what could that lead me to do next and with my time?
Right.
Love
That's right. And so I had spent my whole life proving my worth through work. And I got to this point where I was like, well, what's the point? Why do I want to continue that mindset around work moving forward? And I wasn't sure if I wanted that anymore. And my life became so much bigger and fuller at that time in my life when I had a baby and a toddler and was learning how to parent and figuring it all out. And I realized that I wanted more for my life at that time. And so my name was on the list. I was really happy. And I ended up being able to take a severance. And that's what afforded me to start a business. I always had an entrepreneurial itch. I was actually being coached at the time. I had a coach who really challenged me to think about what I'm passionate about. And she said, well, what if you were to guide the person that you once were, the surviving working mother? And that is what led to me actually starting WorkMom. And I realized that I was using the same skills that built teams on my own life. So, in how I used to build teams, creating vision and knowing your values, knowing the strategy, the potential obstacles that could impede your vision, all of that was actually how I was starting to build my life. And that's what I help others now do in terms of architecting their own life. I help senior leader moms architect their life so that they don't have to essentially fall apart first to find their way through, like I did. It's scary to rethink our entire identity. That's a lot of deep work that a lot of people don't necessarily put the time and the effort into. It's a big deal to really start rethinking, who am I? What do I care about now? What do I value now? What is my perspective? And I come from the belief that there are four loads in modern motherhood, right? So there's the emotional load, there's the logistical load, the mental load, and the identity load. So I think most of us wrap all of those loads. Overwhelm is wrapped up under mental load. And mental load is a very prominent, it's a prominent phrase. We talk about it a lot in modern motherhood, but I really believe that there's so much more that we are carrying that is invisible, such as that identity load, that really weighs us down because a lot of women go through this similar experience where we start to question, who am I now in my career? What do I care about? What do I want? And those are, like I said, really big, hard questions to name. And why I think this is really hard for women specifically is because nobody really warns you that your biggest career years, the ones you spent a decade or more climbing toward, land in the exact same window as the most intense years of raising small kids. And so, your career is taking off inside corporate expectations that assume that, you have no life outside of work. So, this all leads to expectations, and that leads to the load, and that leads to burnout.
Absolutely. So, Mal, what does burnout look like in the people that you're working with most? What's happening in their lives? What's going on mentally?
Oh, yeah. I don't think that burnout actually looks like what the stereotype looks like on the outside, right? I think a lot of us think that burnout is completely falling apart, right? And with the people that I work with who are senior leaders, so they're still performing, they're still delivering, they're still oftentimes incredibly competent people in the room. So it makes it really hard to catch it. Burnout for them really looks like a complete misalignment. They're in a culture that tells them to be endlessly present and not miss a second. And then they have this invisible load. They might have aging parents that start needing them. They have a marriage that they're trying to keep up with. They're trying to keep up with their hormones, sleep, their own body, and all of these things converging at once really leads to this feeling of misalignment. And oftentimes it's her logistical load that is weighing her down. And so oftentimes what happens is it's actually a real decision that she's having to try to figure out that is out of alignment in her life. Going back to the question around what is that first feeling, it's feeling like they don't recognize themselves. It's feeling like they are completely disconnected from themselves. It's hard to detect in those that I work with initially because they are still performing and still delivering and still very, very competent.
Absolutely. Why do you think that the people who are caring the most are the ones who are deeply affected when it comes to this burnout space?
I think carrying the most often means that you're overfunctioning, right? These are the women who are praised for being the reliable one, their sense of worth wired to their output. And so they tend to be the default problem solver everywhere they turn at work and at home. And so every load can default to that, to that person. The toughest part is that the same competence that makes them so good is what stops them from asking for help
Yes.
because as high achievers, type A women, those who overfunction, we tend to treat self sufficiency like proof of competence.
I can do
So,
it myself. I will get it
yeah.
done.
And so then we associate needing help with failing, which is the opposite, right? And so the overfunctioning and the belief that she has to carry it alone is really a big, big problem that I support women in solving for and realizing that delegating and deferring tasks and asking for help is really what is needed in their lives right now.
It's funny because I think that we see burnout starting to become a little bit of a buzzword, right? Now, when we're talking about it in the public sphere, what do you think about that public conversation? What are
Mhm.
we getting wrong?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think the first thing that we're getting wrong is that burnout is not a rest problem. I think that we as a society think, oh, if we just get more rest, if we do some self care, we can solve for the burnout. And so I think the whole conversation around boundaries, doing fewer things, that all certainly helps, but that's not going to actually solve the burnout. and ensure that it doesn't happen again. I think that the public conversation is about like, oh, you just kind of ran low on fuel and you need to refill it up.
Right. Your cup.
Exactly. And while I 100% believe in filling your cup, that is not what is going to get you out of a state of burnout. For the women that I work with, it's not a fuel problem, it's a capacity problem, and it's an architecture problem, a life architecture problem. And so I believe that you can't organize or self care your way out of a life that's structurally asking more than any human can give. And this actually came up with my cousin when I was on a walk with her. I was walking down the street, like, and looking out the window here, and I know exactly where I was. It's crazy how you can remember certain conversations and where you are specifically. This was when I was burnt out completely. I was really on my lowest end dealing with postpartum anxiety. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. And my cousin is one of my closest friends, and she's a nurse practitioner. And she said to me, and I was telling her all of the things that I'm doing. I'm meditating, I'm, seeing a hypnotherapist, I'm working with a coach and another therapist. I was trying to do all of these things. And she goes, "You can't meditate your way out of this kind of anxiety." And I'll never forget that line. The reality is life architecture, misalignment problems, you can't self care your way out of that. And also capacity problems. Capacity problems get solved by letting other people in and sometimes by changing the actual structure of your life. And so I think that the self care conversation puts the whole fix back on her, right? Which then adds more to her to do list when a lot of what is burning her out is the design of the thing, not her lack of grit.
Lots of people are feeling burnt out, whether they're parents, whether they're females, whether regardless of what they have going on, just based upon the expectations in the workforce anyway. My natural desire would be like, well, what can I add to make myself better? Surely I can add extra time in my day. I don't need to sleep. That's so fine. I don't even need
Right.
that. So that is really interesting. One of the things I want to ensure that we do in this episode is I am going to link in all of the details because I anticipate that anybody who's hearing this is going to have tons of, oh crap, aha moments. And they're going to be like, how do I get in touch with her? So I will make sure that that's all looped in. We talked about what the public conversation is. We talked about what we actually see happening. Is there anyone who you think still needs to hear something about burnout or drift? What advice would
Mm.
you provide to them?
I think the thing that I really want to help others understand around burnout is that it's not necessarily a wellness problem. Wellness can support the burnout that you're experiencing, but it really does boil down to a decision oftentimes that you have been avoiding.
Yeah.
For a lot of these women, the exhaustion is oftentimes a signal that something in the architecture of their life has to change. And no amount of recovery fixes that. A bubble bath is not going to fix that. I think that rest treats the symptom, but it doesn't actually support the long-term play around preventing burnout moving forward. They don't have the bandwidth to ideate on why they have outgrown the life that they have built for themselves. And as a result, when you've been in your career for 10, 15 years, there are more stakes involved. You have higher earnings at that point, you have benefits to factor in, potentially equity, things like that, that all make it higher stakes. And it really makes it hard to walk away from this life that you've built that you likely have outgrown. And it's hard to see that and to admit it. And it's hard to actually make a decision around that because you're burnt out. It's oftentimes easier to be told to go take a walk and drink more water than to be told you might have to change something big in your life. My clients are exhausted partly because they can feel that the walk isn't going to fix it, and no one will tell them what actually will. That's, I think, the bigger picture obstacle that is hard to see in the day to day of overwhelm.
I have a question and it's going to veer on the personal side, but it's something that I always
Yeah.
want to know from everybody because the whole point of this podcast, Worth the Work, is what piece of it is really worth it for you, for your personal life, your professional life, whatever piece of your life, right? What in your work today, in your life today, is worth the work?
Oh my gosh, so much. Number one, the first thing that I would say is that I know exactly how this feels. I know exactly how it feels to be burnt out. It's happened to me not once, but 2 or 3 times. And I also know exactly how it feels to feel totally misaligned with how you're living your life, whether that is your career or other parts of your life. For me, it was my career. And when I have the opportunity, because it truly is an opportunity to advise and guide women and men sometimes on getting themselves out of that deep, dark place that I was in, it's 100% worth it. And the other piece is what I'm modeling for my children. I have 2 girls, and I want them to not have to navigate the type of work obstacles that I had to go through in a corporate environment. And so I want them to be able to see other ways of working. I want them to be able to see that there are other options out there. And of course, I do think for me in particular, in your 20s, it was an amazing opportunity to be in corporate. Without a doubt, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have a corporate experience. I want my children to see that is a great avenue. And also, there are other options to ensure that if you do feel out of alignment, you can step back into alignment over time.
I love that. Mel, I am so grateful for your time today. For anybody who's looking to help find their own alignment, Mel is the founder of WorkMom. She is amazing at what she does. We're going to help you find her on LinkedIn and everywhere else. But again, thank you so much for just having this conversation with us, helping us learn a little bit more about that buzzword burnout, but what it really looks and feels like. And more than anything, seeing that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
It
Thank
was such a
you.
pleasure.